Hello and welcome to this Easy Composites video tutorial. This time we're covering a process called Resin Infusion. Now, Resin Infusion is a sophisticated way of making composite components where we actually lay reinforcement, in the case of what we're doing today, carbon fibre reinforcement, dry into the mould. We then enclose that in a vacuum bag. We then connect that up to a vacuum pump, draw the air out, and then finally we draw the resin through into the part so it actually infuses, so wets out the reinforcement under vacuum. We then clamp the line off, allow the part to cure, and the end result is quite astonishingly strong and light components, but specific to the process that we're going to be showing you today, it actually allows for a part that has an absolutely perfect surface finish, which is particularly important when you're working with carbon fibre. No visible air bubbles, no air voids, and that's the process that we're going to be covering today. Okay, so step one is obviously to prepare the mould. Now, this mould has been designed for resin infusion, and you can see that by the fact that what we've actually done is got a very large flange area around the outside of the mould, and this is so that we've got plenty of space to stick the bagging tape that we're then going to stick subsequently stick the bagging film to. So here we are applying the chemical release agent all over the surface of the mould as per the instructions that come with the release agent. We're using Easy Release because it's very reliable and gives a good gloss. Okay, now we've left this mould to dry, it's time to apply the sealant tape around the outside of the mould that we're going to stick the vacuum bag to. Now, as with many things in the infusion process, it is absolutely essential that you use the right material, the right product for the job. So this is special vacuum bagging tape. It's not masking tape, it's not packing tape, nothing else will do. So at every stage, always make sure to have a successful infusion that you're actually using the right materials. So it's now time to actually start adding the reinforcement into this mould. Now in the case of this part, we're using 2,2 carbon fibre. We're actually going to layer in a total of 4 layers of the fabric, and that's actually going to give us a finished part thickness of around about 1 millimetre. Don't have to be too careful with the infusion process unless we've got very complicated or difficult shaped parts. And now it's just a case of trimming round the excess so that we can actually see the flange underneath and have access to that for positioning of the bagging materials. So just using some masking tape now to hold the reinforcement in place. Again, that's going to position the reinforcement, stop it from moving about while we're actually adding the bagging materials. The first layer we add is the peel ply. This actually stops the rest of the bagging stack from sticking to the part. So we cut the peel ply around about the size of the area of the mould up to the tape, and then just position that again using a small amount of masking tape just to hold that peel ply in place. Here's the next layer. This is actually the infusion mesh. Now this is what's going to help the resin to flow through the part and distribute it through the part. Again, we cut this to around about the same area as we've got up to the bagging tape. Again, positioning it with some masking tape to stop it moving around. But in the case of this, what we're going to do is just add a couple of snips in the corner, and that's going to help us to just press down that infusion mesh and stop it from springing off. Next step is the spiral. Now again, this actually helps the resin to flow from where it enters the bag out across the infusion mesh. So we position a silicone connector over the top of the infusion spiral and then just tack using again small pieces of tape. Make sure that the spiral is on top of the infusion mesh because it's the spiral that's going to feed the resin into the mesh. Now the next step across at the other side of the part is to add an additional 2 layers of the infusion mesh. This is actually going to help to spread the vacuum and ensure an even pull of the resin across the part. Now we position another silicone connector. This is the one with the 3 holes or 3 outlets underneath, and that's the actual vacuum connector. And now we're onto the vacuum bag itself. Now the bag you need to cut larger than the mould. Probably in the case of this one, we've cut this about 20 centimeters wider and longer than the taped area on the mould. And then we actually start to seal this bag down onto the tape. And now the reason we did the bag oversized is to allow us to create pleats in the bag. These pleats will allow the bag to drop down following the contours of the mould without bridging, because we can't rely on the stretching of the bag to ensure that it's down fully against the part. So we create these pleats using an extra loop of the gum tape. So we stick the bag up one side of the gum tape and then follow it down the other side, and then we're going to repeat this all around the mould. So here you get a chance to see us doing it again. Running up one side of this extra loop of gum tape and then back down the other side. Now that we've got this fully bagged, it's time to actually pull a vacuum on this. So to do that, what we're going to do is have a hose going from this silicone connector to the resin pot, and we're also going to connect another hose to this silicone connector here, which is going to go to the vacuum via the Catchpot. So the first thing to do is take a length of the vacuum hose and actually cut that so that you've got sufficient to get from the bag to where you're going to be mixing and storing the resin. We're then going to take a length of bagging tape, the same that we used to actually seal the bag in the first place, and wrap that around the hose at the end, leaving about a 2 centimeter gap. Now what this is going to do is allow us to connect the hose to the bag and seal it. So here we are putting a nick into the bag, and then we take the hose with the sealant tape on and push that through into the silicone connector and allow that tape to seal the hose to the bag. Now we're going to go and do the same across on the other side. So again, using a Stanley knife, make a nick in the bag, done it the same again with the bagging tape on the hose, and then connect that to the bag. So we're now setting up the Catchpot, put a liner in there to catch the excess resin, and connect the hose again to the bag, and then on the other end to the Catchpot. So finally we're just left with connecting up the vacuum pump, which we do now, and that goes also into the other connection on the Catchpot. So now we're just going to seal the tube at the other end using a Resin Infusion line clamp, and that's going to stop any air being drawn into the bag when we pull a vacuum on it. Flick the vacuum pump on. This is the valve here that actually opens the vacuum to the rest of this bag, so we're going to open that. You can actually hear the pump really starting to work now, and it'll be through this starting to draw the air out of the bag. As the air is being drawn out by the vacuum, we actually position the bag, move it around, make sure it's into all the corners. This is our opportunity to ensure that we've got plenty of slack and that the slack is positioned around the contours of the mould so that that bag can be firmly against the surface with no bridging. So we can actually keep opening and closing the vacuum, and that allows us more opportunity to position this bag. As we're starting to draw down on this vacuum now, just ensure that the Catchpot lid is seated down firmly. Okay, so now we've pulled what really should be full vac, but straight away I can actually hear a leak coming from the tape, perhaps down this edge somewhere, and we can see on the vacuum gauge, whereas this should be reading right down at 30, minus 30, we've actually, well, nowhere near. So there's clearly a leak here somewhere, and there really is no shortcut for this. What you've got to do is go round, squeezing the tape, looking for anywhere where the break might be, and you actually, well, I can hear the hissing stopped, and you actually do hear a change in note from the vacuum pump as that starts to work in a different environment, so pulling a lot less air out of this bag now. You can actually hear that's changed quite a lot. So whether we've got them all, not sure. We're going to go around checking, looking, pressing, because what we're after is a complete seal to this bag. Now that we're happy that this bag is completely sealed, what we're actually going to do is a foolproof test to see whether this seal really is absolutely perfect. And the way we do that is to take one of these line clamps and actually clamp off the bag so that it's isolated from the vacuum pump. We'll do that now. We can now turn off the vacuum pump, And what we're going to do is leave this for 15 minutes and then come back and we'll actually unclamp this bag and take a look at this vacuum gauge and see if the pressure changes at all. If there is any change, then we know that we've got a small leak in the bag. If the pressure stays exactly the same, then we know that we've got a perfectly sealed bag. We've now waited 15 minutes, so we're going to actually release this line clamp and just take a look at this here. There's absolutely no change whatsoever to the pressure reading on the gauge, and so we know that this bag is completely sealed. We're now ready to actually start the infusion. So the first step is to actually mix up the epoxy. So we're using an infusion epoxy, which is a special low viscosity resin, following the ratio that's shown on the pack. As with all epoxy, it's very important that you actually get the ratio correct. We're using a set of digital scales here, ensuring that we weigh this out as accurately as we possibly can, and then weighing out the hardener as well as accurately as we possibly can. Okay, this is now thoroughly mixed, but as you can see, the process of mixing it has actually mixed, even though we were careful, has actually mixed a small number of air bubbles sort of all the way throughout the resin. So what we're going to do, because we definitely don't want to draw these through into the part, is leave this resin to stand for about 10 minutes, and that will just give it a chance to degas before we draw it into the part. So it's now time for the exciting bit. We take the resin feed line and put that into the mixed resin pot and hold that tube in place, which is very important, using one of the other line clamps. We don't clamp it up tight, we just use it to hold the tube on the side of the container. And we then remove the line clamp that's preventing the resin from being drawn into the bag, and immediately you can see that resin very quickly starts to infuse through the part. Helped along, of course, by the fact that it is a low viscosity infusion resin, and there you can actually see a close-up of the resin being drawn through. Now this hasn't really been sped up a great deal at all. The entire infusion for this part takes around about 4 or 5 minutes, and you can quickly see the resin advancing throughout the part. Now in the technique that we've developed, we actually let the resin reach the vacuum line at the other side, which is of course why the catchpot is so important, but this gives it an opportunity to draw out some of the resin that's aerated. You can see the gas in that resin. At this point we clamp off the supply side where the resin's coming from, wait a few seconds, and then with resin clearly being drawn out at the other side, we clamp that side. Now this infusion's complete, we're completely clamped off at both ends. We're going to leave this for 24 hours and then come back and demold. So there's nothing particularly complicated about the debagging process. It's just a case of removing these line clamps, removing the hoses, and then just short, sharp tugs of the gum tape from around the edge of the mould. Remove this bag, and then we're actually onto removing the part itself. So we've used the easy release earlier. That, as we said, gives a very good release. As you can see, just pops out of the mould, and then here we are, the finished part. Removing the peel ply and mesh from the back of the part can be tricky, so what we suggest doing is just snipping it and then pulling off the peel ply and mesh in strips. With all of the peel ply now removed, the only thing that's left to do on this part is trim it all the way around the edge, and that's going to leave us with our finished carbon fibre part. So everything that you've seen in this resin infusion video, from the pump to the peel ply to the actual infusion resin itself, are all available to buy individually on the Easy Composites website or as part of our complete resin infusion starter kit.